Hello, I'm Frost, and welcome to this guide where we're going to be covering the Shakarn, which are the new playable race stroke faction in the Invasions DLC for Age of Wonders Planetfall. Okay, the approach we're going to take to this video is that first of all we're going to look at all the various units. We're then going to look at the mods that we can put on those units, and then we will look at the tactical operations and the doctrines, and then kind of just get a good overall view of what you actually do get with the Shakarn. So as you can see from my lovely commander here, we have Enolis Rocket, who is my Shakarn commander, and she is looking absolutely glorious. And what we'll do is we're going to drop onto the main map, and as you can see I've got all my units up here so that we can take a look at them. So the very first units we're going to look at are the tier 1 and tier 2s, and the first one is the Raider. So the first thing you're going to see on the left hand side is that we have two types of damage. So we have explosive damage and or explosive and thermal damage, and then we have obviously the Omni Carbine. And what is unusual with this is that these are close assault. So unlike the Vanguard where you kind of really hold back, with these, as you can see, close assault deals -1 for each hex away from the target. So the further away you are from your target, the less damage you're going to do. So they really want you to run up close, almost in melee positions with your enemy, and then attack from there. We then have this other ability called Omni Rush. Now what Omni Rush does is actually do a lance effect down 3 hexes, and those 3 hexes are directly in front of the unit. And so therefore, once again, it ties in with running up to the unit, to the enemies, and shooting your lance and hopefully taking out multiple enemies at once. Now, what we need to look at more importantly for all of the units is epimorphic regeneration and xeno debilitation. Both of these apply to pretty much all of the units except the recon. And epimorphic regeneration allows your units to regenerate 6 vitality each turn, whilst the xeno debilitation gives you a -2 resistance against status effects. Now this -2 resistance takes effect across all of the Shakarn and is their biggest weakness. So you have to be well aware of that, although as you'll see when we get to mods, there are ways that we can counter this with mods. But the epimorphic regeneration is going to come in really handy. The other thing with the units is that they're all amphibious, and so they don't have the issue of having to board a ship when going over water. They can just move straight over water. So no problems there, and that is extremely handy with the Shakarn because obviously you can do sights offshore without losing turns getting on and off at the beaches. So that kind of covers the 3 main attributes, shall I say, of the Shakarn, which is epimorphic, xeno, and amphibious. And we've looked at the weapons, and we've seen that we've kind of got this dual sonic and thermal damage, dual explosive and thermal damage. What we're going to do now is we're going to move away from this. Just before we move away, though, you'll notice that they are armor-based, and you'll find that the mods then provide shields. So overall, between the xeno debilitation and the armor, they are very weak against psionic attacks, so it's something to be aware of. Now, if we look quickly at the recon unit, now the recon is slightly different because it doesn't have the xeno debilitation or the epimorphic regeneration. These are mouthfuls, but it does have a pretty good little weapon, a Sonopulse, but its main thing is this Recon Boy. Recon Boy is great, so if you know that your units or your enemies are going to be attacking you from a specific route or going to take a specific path, you can drop down this reconnaissance boy, and what it will do, as you can see from here, is it has a 2 hex radius, makes everything 20% easier to hit for 1 turn. And then its effect is reapplied, and it lasts for 2 turns, and it's got a cooldown of 2 turns, so that means you can just keep redeploying it. So really, really good. I mean, otherwise, apart from that, it's got your usual kind of recon. It's got the +1 vision range, and it's also actually upkeep cost is reduced. Not quite sure why they'd want to do that, but it has it, and it also has water camouflage as well. And you'll find a number of the Shakarn units have that, where they can't be detected over water. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the tier 2 unit, which is the Deadeye. Now the Deadeye really is kind of like a Vanguard Trooper. except that it has something called Deadly Overwatch. So whilst the Vanguard and other units have Overwatch, like the Arborian, the Arborian Commune, have Overwatch, this one has Deadly Overwatch, which gives it a plus 15% crit chance. So that is really, really good. They're also heavy units, and so they are much less likely to be staggered. And as you can see, they've got their stagger resistance up here. And a really good sort of solid troopers to have. They're really tanky as well, with plus 5 armor. So they're great tier 2 units, and you want to bolster up your armies at the beginning with these, as they're pretty tough. In terms of damage, nothing special. They obviously have the Omni Cannon, same as the Raider, and then they have the Omni Perforator, which does the same thing, does damage in a 3 hex lines, except that this bypasses armor as well, which makes them why they're more preferable than the Raider. You don't have to have them quite up close as you do with the Raiders as well. So what we'll do is we'll move on from there, and we will look at this chap at the back here. So if I can select him properly, there we go. So it's your typical tier 2 flying unit, nothing special. It has standard weapon, and then it has an area of effect weapon, which in this case is the Dissonance, which does stagger, etc. It does have an extra armor on it, so its armor once again is pretty good. It's one of the few units with a shield as base, and if you're using propagation towers, which we'll come on to later, then this unit can be affected by them and get a buff from them. So there we go. The one thing that is unusual though, it does have Hollow Mend, which is a healing ability, and normally most of the flying units don't have this. It's normally given to a ground unit, so this is unusual and something to be aware of. So a good reason why you'd want these in, as well as obviously having the bonus towards air-to-air attacks, which is normally common for flying units. Then moving along, also just to mention that we have two kind of casts. So these two guys, the Raider and the Deadeye, are your Domok, and then you have the Zardas, which are kind of the intelligence or covert ops guys. And this guy is really the star of the show. This is the Infiltrator. Now, the Infiltrator is really, really unique to the Shakarn. It does pretty good damage already with its weapon, but its main ability is this thing called Hollow Shift. Now, Hollow Shift allows it to assume the form of the enemy. And that can be a tier 1, tier 2, or even a tier 3 unit, which is pretty impressive. It will then copy that unit for 4 turns. So that is really, really handy. You want to run him up front and find one of the best units that's attacking you that you can, and you can then transform into that unit. What it also has is it has this thing called Hollow Shift Repeat. And what Hollow Shift Repeat does is it remembers the last Hollow Shift that you did. And that doesn't necessarily apply to this tactical combat. It could have been from a previous tactical combat. So you may have been fighting the Amazons and become an Arborian Commune, for example, and now you're fighting some Therians or something like that, and you can then transform yourself back into that Arborian Commune from a previous battle. So, really, really interesting, this unit. Now, obviously, it has the Epiformic Regeneration, there's a Debilitation, but it has 2 other buffs, which come in through actually research. So you've got lifelike holograms and weighted holograms. I think weighted holograms is the first one you get, and I'll show you where these are in the research tree. And that gives you +1 armor and +10 damage. And then later on you get lifelike holograms, which gives you +2 shields and +10 damage. And obviously that stacks. And if we quickly go into, let me show the research for the military, it'll be up here. So here we go, Holotech Applications, which is a tier 4. You can see there's weighted holograms. And then when you train up cast advancements, you then get the other one, which is lifelike holograms. So something to be aware of, that as you start training up your research, your Infiltrator becomes more powerful. He's also associated with the Doctrine, which I'll mention very, very quickly in the society tree. It's right up the top here. You get the ability here to do the Zardas channels, and it gives you +30 damage on your Infiltrators, even when they're hollow shifted. So that is a really, really powerful thing, but obviously it's right at the very end of the research tree. So moving back to the Domoks, we have one of my favorites. We have this guy, the Firebrand, and the Firebrand is a melee unit, and he kind of stomps around, as I mentioned in my guide and stuff. He stomps around, But what he does as well is he has this really good ability, which is 20 damage. But you get on top of that, I don't know if you can see down the bottom there, you get charge plus 20 damage if the unit moves at least 3 hexes. So if you take a run up at units with this, it does basically loads and loads of damage, especially with the staggering force. So to be aware of. And then obviously you've got Omni Claw, which is a melee, and we have the Omni Shot, which is similar to the Raiders. And once again, tanky and gets the benefits of some shields as well. So yeah, great unit to have. Highly recommend the Firebrand. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Tactician. So the Tactician is the other Zardath. And this one is really interesting because it has a lot of abilities and it is very, very useful. So it obviously has good damage. You've got the Sonoblast there. But then it's got Press the Advantage, which allows you to do, as you can do with a lot of other factions, is reset all the action points on a particular unit. And it has only a cooldown of 1. So that's pretty useful. So you can keep reusing that, and you should be aware of that. So the Tactician is really useful. But then it has this thing called Fallback. Now, if you play XCOM Chimera Squad and you know Torque, she has this kind of tongue pull ability which you could pull units. It's the same for the Tactician. So what it can do is if you've got a unit that's struggling up front, normally you have to rush units forwards to heal it. Not so with the Tactician. With the Tactician, you can use Fallback. Now you can only use it every 3 turns, but you can pull a unit back from the front of the ranks and heal them for 25 vitality. And also remove the status effect. So that is really, really good. And then we have One of Us All Along, which I really like. This basically, unlike the Infiltrator, you can use this on tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. This is only tier 1 and tier 2. But what it does is it says, actually, that was one of our sleeper agents, and turns one of the enemy units into one of yours. And then they appear next to your Tactician on the adjacent hex. So that's a nice little touch there, and I like that. That's why he's got such an evil little grin, you see. So he knows he can mention his sleeper agents. And those are the kind of the key abilities, but they are good abilities, and I really like those. And obviously then you've got, your standard Epimorphic and Xeno. So there you go. So Tactician. And then we have our elite unit, or our vehicle. So obviously the Propagator that we saw earlier is a vehicle, and then we have this one, which is the Refractor. Now the Refractor has a pretty good base weapon, which is the Sonic Ebb. But then what happens is that this is kind of similar to Essence Charges with the Heritor, is that every time you use the Sonic Ebb, it pulls an Ebb, which is this thing, this arbitrary thing. And once you've pulled up to 2 Ebbs, those Ebbs can then be turned back into a flow, and they give you a buff to your Sonic Flow. So you can see that at the bottom here, ebb and flow. So each ebb consumed increases damage by 10%. And you can get 2 of those. So you can boost your damage by 20% and also boost your range by up to 2 hexes. And it has a cooldown of 1. So the idea is you use your ebb twice, use your Sonic Flow once, and then rinse and repeat. So pretty interesting unit, but that's all it has. And then it has water camouflage similar to the Recon, where it can't be detected from water hexes. Not really sure about the value of that, but I do like the ebb and flow. I think that's an interesting aspect. Then finally, we come on to the top unit, which is the Shakarn. And to be honest, I'm really disappointed with this. I think this is a complete waste of time. As you can see, its basic weapon is rubbish. I mean, it's just like 10 damage for a weapon of a unit of this class, a tier 4, seems really bizarre. Now you have the Omni Beam. The Omni Beam has to be spooled up, so you have this thing called the Omni Charge. So that takes a full action and takes a turn to charge the unit up, and then your Omni Beam can be fired, and it fires a 3 hex line, and it fires it 6 hexes long. So it does this kind of big wide lance effect, which is great, but to be honest, I feel that this unit just doesn't do enough damage. And on top of that, it doesn't have an ability for the whole army, like a Anthem of the Abyss or something like that, that rallies the troops and helps your whole army. So it's not really a flagship in the same way that the Dreadnought is for the Dvar, for example. And yeah, so I'm really not impressed with this, and I think you could fill up your armies with other units that are much better than this, like the Tactician, for example. Even the Firebrand is, to me, more effective than this unit. So yeah, there you go. So those are all the units, but they are interesting. Apart from the Sonocan, I can see the value of all of the others. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the modules. So if we go into the mods, let's do that. So, oops, I always pick the wrong one. There we go. So all the mods are obviously defensive, and straight out the bat, you've got this one, which actually is an offensive mod. Most of them are defensive. So this gives you 10% damage and allows you to add a status effect. So it's kind of your standard tier 1 module for your units, like your raiders and your Deadeyes. And then you get a tactical operation, which is also, again, an offensive one, which does damage in a 1 hex radius. Then further up, now we start getting into other mods that are useful. So this one is similar to Acidic Composite for the, I think for the Amazons, which destroys 1 armor per hit, and gives a 10% buff. So once again, great for your Raiders and your Deadeyes. I would say that this one and the Deafening Amplifiers are kind of your standard fit for your units. In fact, I was actually meant to be going on the defensive mods. This is why we're on the offensive, because I'm actually doing the Sonic one. So what we'll do is we'll do the Sonics, and then we'll come back to the Shakarn specific ones. But as Sonic is specific to the Shakarns, it's all kind of related. Tactical Operation, once again, Sonic Frequency, this time 2 hexes and destroys shields, which is good if you're dealing with units that are heavily on shields. Then we got up to Sound Augmentation, once again a status effect with this time 20% damage. And then we have this thing called Reverb, which is another status effect, 20% damage. So kind of your standard accrual of damage as you go up through the ranks. And then you got this one, and you get this unit gains 3. I can't work out what this is. I've looked online, I've looked on the forums, I've looked in the wikis, I've checked everywhere. So this unit gets 3 of a star with a green arrow in it. If you know what this is, please tell me, because I have no idea. I've even tried to use it on my units, and I can't work out what it is. All I know is it can do a status effect and also gives you +2 shields. So we'll move on from that one. And then look at Rapid Cavitation. All right, so this is once again, another mod that affects in an area of effect, and it basically can stack, increasing the damage with each stack up to 15. And then finally up the top here, we have Perfect Resonance, which is another damage mod. This time it's a 30% ability, which is great, plus the status effect. And then we get a Tactical Operation, which does a status effect every turn. So similar to all the factions have this in some shape or form. Right, so coming back to what I was originally going to go, which is my defensive mods. So we've got Discerning Systems, which gives you extended detection, sensor range, and gives you a shield. And you get a Defensive Tactical Operation, which is a healing. Then we go up to Impairing Grenade. So this is an area effect weapon, which is pretty handy. Allows you to throw grenades, similar to what the Dvar have, and gives you an extra armor. Now this one is the important one, the Xeno Defense Module. So as you can see, this gives you +3 damage resistance to the last damage type you received. So if you remember, the Shakarn have -2 resistance to status effects. So this is really, really useful in trying to offset that. So obviously it affects damage until the end of combat. Now this works really well when you're doing sights. So in sights, generally you're fighting, let's say, the Paragon, or you're fighting a Synthesis group or a Promethean group. And so all their damage will be the same type. And you really want to fit this to all of your units when you're doing the landmarks, for example. And also you get a +1 shield, which is a bonus. Then we move up to Holotech Application. So as I mentioned, it gives a buff to your infiltrators. We then get this Displacement Shield, which gives you Skitter, which is similar to one I think you get with the Amazons. Makes you harder to hit with each hex that you move. So the more you move, the harder you are to hit on the next turn. And also you get Water and River Camouflage. And then you get a Tactical Operation, which is an area of effect 1, which gives you a buff to you and a nerf to your enemies within a 3 hex area. Orbit tactics is a funny one. So we get this tactical operation called orbital abduction, which is an alien abduction. And so you pull up one of your enemies, gets pulled into orbit, and you get to research them. And you get a research bonus per tier of the abducted unit. So 15 research per tier. So that's kind of funny. There you go. So you can zoom people up into space and abduct them. But then what they also have is this great unit. This is really another one of the really good units you want to kind of get in mid-game. Because what this does is it gives you teleport. And it says a cooldown of 3, and it starts on a cooldown, so you have to wait before you can use it. But it's great for flanking. And, you put this on a firebrand, for example, and, you can do a lot of damage with this because you can, teleport your firebrand in a flanking position, do loads of melee damage, and then get a melee overwatch on them afterwards. So highly recommend this one. I think this is great and gives you a +1 shield. So as you can see, the Shakarn by default have armor, but they get a lot of mods that give them shield bonuses as well, which can make them really, really tanky. Then cast advancements, we mentioned earlier again with the bonus to the infiltrator. And then we get these things called the exoskeletons, which is really good. It's an offensive mod, really. It's called a defensive mod, but you get +25 crit, +20 accuracy, and stagger resistance, and you get +2 armor. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. That's a really good one to have, especially if you want to still be using your tier 1 and 2 units, like your Deadeyes and Raiders later in game, then this is a really good one to put on. And then you've got this Hollow Reality Mantle. I see its benefits. I don't know how useful it would be as a mod, to be honest. It has the ability to create a status effect and protects you, but I think it's very expensive for what it does. But if you have a different opinion, then please let me know. And then right up the top of the tree, we get the serious stuff, where we get +30% damage increase, +2 armor, and we get a status effect. So yeah, it's pretty hardcore. Same with the hologrammatic engines. You get a +2 on your shields and really buffs up your heavy units. And then finally you get a tactical operation, which is pretty insane, but obviously costs 8 tactical operation points. So very much endgame stuff. So that kind of covers the mods. And as you can see, the mods are interesting. They give you abilities that are different from some of the other factions. And if we move over to society, and we'll look quickly at the doctrines. So in terms of the doctrines, we've got Dwelling Intimidation, which is really nice, especially if you use this with Celestian Secret Tech. You get a 10% discount on influence points dealing with an NPC faction. And you get the faction war request earlier, and we get the bonuses for it earlier. So early game, I think this is really good, especially if you want to take over settlements and stuff like that. I think that's really useful. But more importantly, this one is great if you're on a coastline or on a shoreline. You get a +12 bonus to food on your colonies, and you get a +4 bonus to morale. So they're pretty good to start with. And then we get these propagation towers, and the propagation towers tie in with the strategic operations, and we'll have a quick look at the strategic operations in a sec. But these propagation towers are worth having in as many colonies as you can. As you will see from the strategic operations, they can give a lot of different bonuses, and they are unique to the Shakarns. Then we have manipulation campaigns, which once again gives you a bonus to raising colonies. And I don't think any of the other factions that I recall give you this kind of bonus. So yeah, that's pretty good. So the idea is they want the Shakarns to be very destructive. And then we get this one, which ties in with their strategic operations, which you'll see, which are very kind of covert ops. You get +4 when using Infiltrate Operations Center, which is great. And you get bonuses to research and to influence. So the Shakarns are great for dealing with NPC factions, getting research bonuses, and also on covert ops. And then right at the top here, you can either choose to buff your Demox, which is your assault units, or you can boost up your Zardas, which are things like your infiltrators, which I mentioned earlier. +30 damage on infiltrators is pretty good, and bonuses to covert ops as well. So let's look at the strategic operations. I'm trying to think of the best way of doing it, whether we should do it through the map. No, what we'll do is we'll do it through here. So we've got propaganda propagation, lots of P's there. So as you can see, disinformation, so really affects morale on enemy units. We then have motivating broadcast, which ties in with these towers. So what this does is allow you to build your units much, much faster, as you get a plus 15 bonus to production, and also they get a morale boost as well. You have to be aware that running propagation towers has an upkeep cost, and you can see there that affected colonies produce -5 energy negative, and also your propagators costs go up by 25%. So you need to be aware of that. But if you need that, so you make sure you have energy in hand, but your production will boost up. Then Cold War measures. Once again, we've got propaganda, so we're affecting morale, and you potentially can have 2 colonists revolt within a colony. And then we have Cold War measures, which ties in with the propagation towers again. And so all your units there gain +1 shield, which is really, really handy. And then finally, up the top, we've got perfected holotech here. And what this does is all your colonies, everyone's really happy because they're getting these broadcasts telling them that everything is fine. And so your morale, your colonist happiness is boosted by +10. And on top of that, enemies get hallucination, or have a chance to get hallucination. So I think that about covers everything. Yep, I think it does. So there we go. So that's the Shakarn. I will be playing these guys a lot. I am, in fact, right now on Twitch streaming this on Saturday nights. So if you want to see more of the Shakarn in action in playthroughs, please come join me on Twitch. And I also play other sci-fi games, normally on a Wednesday. And that could be things like XCOM Chimera Squad. I might do X-War Foundation, sometimes Battlestar Galactica, Deadlock. It varies. But there we go. And hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a like. You can dislike too, that's okay. And of course, please be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of new releases, as I do produce quite a lot of content on a regular basis. All right, thank you very much for watching. As always, thank you. See you soon until the next one. Bye.